It's selection time again, and here on Stay of the Water, we're continuing our discussion with candidates who want to represent you in statewide office. Today, we'll talk with two candidates who want to become your next Attorney General. This is Stay of the Water. I'm your host, Dr. Claville, and we'll be back in just a moment. Welcome back. You're joining us here on Stay of the Water. I'm your host, Dr. Claville. We want to thank all of you for joining us on this beautiful Sunday here that we're experiencing in Hampton Roads. To all of our listeners all over the country, keep in mind, we've got listeners that listen to us in Texas and Florida, Louisiana, and all across the East Coast and all the states in between. Thank you so much for your support of Stay of the Water, an initiative of the Center for African American Public Policy here at Norfolk State University and the Spartan Nation. Also, we'd like to congratulate all of the graduates that we recognize for 2020 and 2021 here at Norfolk State University. Congratulations on reaching that milestone and getting your degree. I also like to give a special congratulations to our producer, DJ Scandalous, who also graduated, and he's continually working toward his master's in cybersecurity. So we're anxiously anticipating that graduation, and all others, our personnel here, Harrison, who's graduated, and all others who are Braxton, who's graduated, everyone here within WNSB and part of the staff, congratulations. And those of you who are now a part of the alumni of the Spartan Nation, again, congratulations. Well, this ends our school year here, but we're continuing the conversation, and State of the Water is moving forward as it relates to this election that we have coming up in the primaries for the Democratic slate of candidates who want to represent you in statewide office. Now, keep in mind that the Republicans, they had their convention with their delegates, and they have selected their candidates to represent their party in the upcoming election. So on this particular series, what we're doing is just talking with the primary candidates who are running to represent you in statewide office on the Democratic slate. So you can join us on social media. You can stream us on wnsbonline.org and also engage us in our topic of the day. What do you think about the CDC lifting the mask mandate or suggestion that individuals who are fully vaccinated don't have to wear a mask inside or out? What are your thoughts? Do you think we're going too far? Do you think it's too early? What do you think about the vaccinations themselves? And universities and places of employment are saying that in order to come on campus, you have to be fully vaccinated. What do you think? Chime in. Let us know on social media at Hot91 Online. That's at Hot91 Online. And finally, on tomorrow, we're starting our membership drive here at WNSB Blazing Hot 91. So keep in mind, for May 17th, 18th, and 19th, that's Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, you can give to support what we do here at WNSB Blazing Hot 91 at Norfolk State University by donating whatever level you're comfortable with, because every single dollar counts, every single support counts. You can go to nsu.edu/WNSB donate. That's www.nsu.edu/WNSB donate. And keep in mind that we will get through this together. So today we are humbled to have with us our current sitting Attorney General, Mark Herring, who's running for re-election and wants to talk with you to let you know why he wants to represent you again as our Commonwealth's Attorney General. Attorney General Mark Herring, thank you so much and welcome to State of the Water.
Well, hello, Eric, and thank you so much for having me. And to all the listeners out there, good afternoon. And I'd just like to also add my congratulations to our new graduates. Congratulations. And I know it's an exciting time for all of you, and we're very proud of your accomplishments and wish you the very best in all your future endeavors.
Absolutely, absolutely. You and I, some years ago, we were in that position, and we look at the world as being our oyster, and then sometimes we get hit in the face with reality. But the dream is still alive, and you can accomplish anything you want to accomplish and accomplish your goals. And this milestone for all of our graduates is a huge milestone, but just not here in Norfolk State, but also all over the Commonwealth itself. So
yeah, it kind of reminds me that it's so important to be, open to things that come your way. I remember in my own life, I kind of charted one particular career path, and it turned out that wasn't the one for me, and ended up going to law school. And sometimes you think you know what you want, but it takes a little time to sort it out.
Absolutely. Several years ago, you and I, we talked. We were at a function. You may not remember, but we actually talked about our time with the best job we had in college, which was waiting tables at a restaurant. And for me, it was at a private dinner club, and how, that particular job, that we held, and more specifically, I talk about my experience where it taught a lot of life skills and a lot of life lessons in dealing with all types of individuals. And to your point, Attorney General, it's those types of lessons that really teach you that, hey, your path may be a little different, but keep moving on principle, hard work, and your life would definitely end up in the place where it should be.
Yeah, my first job out of high school, I was raised by a single mom, and my first job out of high school was working construction, and I was a laborer. I worked my way up to running a 135-pound jackhammer, 58 hours a week in the hot Virginia sun. And, I'm here to tell you that builds both muscles and character. But I learned a lot. It taught me the value of hard work. It taught me that everyone deserves to be treated fairly and deserves to be paid fairly for their work and for their labor, and that everyone has hopes and dreams for themselves and for their families. They deserve quality health care. They deserve the best education possible for their kids, and they deserve to be paid and treated fairly. And so that's why I've always fought for ordinary Virginians, hardworking people who put in an honest day's work. They deserve to be treated fairly, and that's why I fought so hard for people and making sure that they have good wages, that they have good health care, and the best education possible for their kids.
Absolutely. There's a slight difference with the Office of Attorney General and the Office of Governor here in the Commonwealth. Constitutionally, we know that the governor a person cannot run for consecutive offices or terms for the office of governor. But that's not the case for Attorney General. And it's something that's been synonymous the last 8 years with Attorney General, and that's been Mark Herring. Give us an idea of in those 8 years, kind of what you've learned and what was the difference in working in those different administrations?
Well, it really gets back to the vision that I brought to this job, and the reason why I ran for it in the first place. Before we reclaimed this job for the people, Republicans in Virginia looked at the Attorney General's office sort of like it was a private law firm for the Republican Party. And, I had a very, very different vision. My vision is that the Attorney General is really the people's lawyer, and that the powers of the office should be on the side of the people. So that's why one of the first things I did, it was to go into court and say, no, we're not going to defend an unconstitutional ban on marriage for same-sex couples. We're going to fight for marriage equality. Now, it was not necessarily popular at the time. There were Republican members of the legislature who tried to impeach me for that, but it was the right thing to do. We won, and we have made so much progress since then. We've been able to protect people's health care. We've fought for Dreamers to get in-state tuition rates. We fought to have a clean Chesapeake Bay. It was under legal attack, and we won those. We stood, and then we also had 4 years of Donald Trump, and so a lot of the work was just literally protecting our democracy and pushing back against the worst excesses of his agenda. And so I had to go in and defend the Affordable Care Act to protect people's health care from yet another legal challenge. And we went all the way to the Supreme Court to protect health care. I led the charge on blocking Trump's racist Muslim ban. And so a lot of the work was really centered around that, as well as continuing to do the other parts of the job that were so important for Virginians. We were able to eliminate Virginia's backlog of untested rape kits. This has meant so much to survivors all across the state. And with that, it was also about turning a page on how Virginia responded to sexual and domestic violence, to make sure that we were meeting it with a understanding of the impact that trauma can have, and help restore the control that was taken away from survivors and help them on a path of healing and recovery. Mm-hmm. We've also led the charge on addressing the opioid epidemic that has touched the lives of so many Virginians and all across America, and make sure that we, did not follow the same failed drug policy of the past and think we could arrest our way out of it, but look at it as a public health crisis and, work to expand treatment and hold those pharmaceutical and drug companies responsible for the harm that they've caused. So there's been a lot of work done, but we've made a lot of progress. There's still more to do in making policing safer, in making our criminal justice system more equal and more fair. Again, we've made a lot of progress there over the last year, but there's still a lot more work to do, and that's why I'm asking Virginians again, the Virginia Democrats, to help me lead their banner and support for building on this tremendous progress that we've been making.
Absolutely. And, I want to delve into several of those aspects while we have you here for our conversation. But you mentioned the 4 years of Donald Trump, and it seems like that was just so long ago. But the impact but we know it wasn't, but the impact of those policies had such a damaging and damning effect on our democracy that we're still kind of fighting and kind of digging our way out of it still to this day, especially with misinformation and the like. And one aspect of it is when you talked about fighting for justice and equality for all Virginians, and I'll talk about the fight for equity in just a moment. But in fighting for justice, I think one thing that we saw that was kind of started in the McAuliffe administration when you served first under those 4 years, and then under Governor Northam's, we saw the bullhorn and the bully pulpit used in order to delegitimize the existence of African Americans and other people of color to exist. And we saw that, of course, in Charlottesville. And, of course, we saw that in other things that we're seeing today. What are some of the steps that your office has taken, and what do you plan to do in the future in order to address those attacks on African Americans and the like from a hate crime standpoint?
Yeah, the rise in hate, has its roots that go back 4 centuries of white supremacy in this country, and it's got to stop. And people like Donald Trump use that for their political benefit, but it was so damaging to Black Americans, to really, I would say, our democracy, which is founded on the vision and promise of equality. And we've got so much more to do to get there. And we saw this white supremacist, the rise in it just really accelerated and ignited in 2016 with Donald Trump's campaign, and it continued and emboldened those who would take up the cause of white supremacy, and it really showed in the worst way in Charlottesville, and that's why we have to push back on that. And not just push back on it and reaffirm to everyone that they are a full part of our Commonwealth, but also pair those words with actions
Right.
That's why I went to the legislature to get some new tools so that we could prosecute hate crimes in our office, because one of the aspects of hate crimes is that it may be against a single individual, but the purpose of it is to really spread fear and into an entire community and try to push them into the shadows to make them feel like they're not a full part of the Commonwealth. And so addressing that with additional tools to combat hate crimes has been a priority. And there are other ways that we have to address the inequality and inequities that we know that permeate all aspects of our society. So that's why I've worked so hard as Attorney General to keep symbols of propaganda, and get rid of them. So I've won a landmark case to keep the Confederate flag off of our license plate.
Yeah. And
landmark lawsuits to remove Confederate statues because, like in a courthouse, how do you explain to a black man or a black woman who's going to court that they literally have to walk around a statue and a monument to people who would have sought to enslave them and say, and you're going to get a fair trial here.
Right.
So you can't explain that because it's wrong. But still, that's one piece of it, but there's so much more throughout our society. And, when you mentioned we'll get to equity, it is so important that we look at all of those structures in our society and break the racism down and rectify it.
Absolutely.
Last year, we completed the first ever investigation into systemic racial bias in a Virginia school system. It was in Loudoun County. There's a special high school that the county has, and it admitted one black student.
Oh.
And so we investigated that and found that the systemic racism went far deeper than just the admissions criteria. There was a climate that needed to change, as well as policies that go back to the very earliest grades, first grade, second grade, where students were pulled out into special academic programs, and then they were on that track, and then there was everybody else who really almost couldn't get into those for the rest of their elementary, middle, and high school years. So now we've done that and have a framework for addressing it in other school districts. And I think we can even apply that same framework now, and this is what we're looking at, to health outcomes. We know that including in Hampton Roads, there are very large health systems. And when you look at it, there are racial disparities in health outcomes. And so we need to look at how we address that within our health system as well and break down those policies and those systems that allow for those racial disparities to persist.
Absolutely. You're listening to WNSB Blazing Hot 91, Stay of the Water. Today we are continuing our conversation with candidates who want to represent you in statewide office. Today we're talking with Attorney General Mark Herring about the accomplishments of his last 8 years as Attorney General and why he wants to run for re-election again and represent you as the Chief Attorney General Officer here in our Commonwealth. When we talk about equity, I want to wrap this around promoting economic opportunity. A lot of times we find where the African American community is called upon to march, called upon to voice their support for certain issues, called upon to vote for certain candidates, called upon to stand in the forefront and really be the foot soldiers, both not just in rhetoric, not just in standing and marching, but also in holding up a lot of these agenda items that really push equality and equity forward. But they find themselves left out of the conversation when we start to talk about economic opportunity. What has your office done and what do you plan to do to move that needle forward where African Americans are brought to the table before the deals are started as opposed to an afterthought? And not just deals, but also in drafting a policy and things of that nature, based upon how far you can go as Attorney General?
Well, first of all, it's important to have a team that reflects the diversity that Virginia represents, and I have built really a world-class team of lawyers and professional staff that do represent the diversity of Virginia, including appointing as my chief deputy, the first African-American woman to hold that position. And so that, it sort of starts there to make sure that there are diverse voices around the table in positions of leadership. And it also involves a multifaceted response in breaking down those inequities so that Black Virginians can have that economic growth as well.
Absolutely.
So it starts with education. And I talked a little bit about how we have to break down those systemic barriers to opportunities to achieve your potential. Everyone should have the opportunity to achieve their potential. And so we have to break those systems down and rectify them. It also involves healthcare, where we've got to identify where those systems are failing minority communities and make sure that those inequities are addressed. And in housing, because that's one of the ways that we can pass on generational wealth and help young people get stronger starts.
Right.
And so there have been patterns of housing, the legacy of redlining, of segregation persists in so many communities where there's concentrated poverty, most often with Black and brown Virginians. And so we've got to address those housing policies because of the legacy of that segregation. And we've got to have opportunities so that we can address them. We just got a new policy and law change that would prohibit discrimination based on source of income.
Wow.
So what we had been seeing is that landlords would say, oh, Section 8 housing voucher? No, I'm not going to accept it. And now we've got a law now that prohibits that, and our office is taking enforcement action to make sure that that doesn't happen. And so there are ways that we can work to break down those centers of concentrated poverty and begin to make sure that people have opportunities to live where they want, work where they want, and begin to accumulate wealth.
Absolutely. And again, we stress a lot, not a hand out, but a hand up, and equitable, not just equal, but more specifically equitable opportunity. And I think that speaks to the equitable economic opportunity that all Virginians can have, including African Americans, who we know historically have been left out of that. Now, another issue that we've been dealing with a lot, of course, I think it's probably one of the main issues that we've dealt with in our country and through ideology and action, and that's smart gun policy. Some people call it gun control, some people call it gun ban, but we with the Second Amendment, we talk about gun policy and smart gun policy. In your platform, you talk about ending gun violence. We also have seen guns being used as an intimidation factor in Richmond on Capitol Hill, where on Martin Luther King Day, we have Gun Rights Day, and people come wearing guns and coming to the General Assembly where the General Assembly members are. Now I do know we're not going to solve that issue, and everyone's not going to come under one umbrella through our ideology as it relates to that. But from your perspective, what have you done to foster smart gun policy to both respect the Second Amendment, but also to help to end gun violence? And how do you plan to take that further?
Well, we have a gun violence problem in our country and in our Commonwealth. And we are raising a generation of young people who are going to school and practicing, active shooter drills. Mm-hmm. They are going to school thinking they may be the victim of the next mass shooting, and not even necessarily a mass shooting, which are horrific.
Just a regular shooting.
Just playing in the park, or going to the movies, or the mall. And so that's just, the status quo is unacceptable, and life doesn't have to be this way, and it shouldn't be this way. I have consistently taken on the gun lobby that has gotten us to where we are, and we are finally beginning to pass some new laws that make sense. So we have gotten expanded background checks, but we can strengthen them even more and make them universal. We now have, we've reinstated our one handgun a month law, which was passed under Governor Wilder and repealed under the former Republican General Assembly. We've now reinstated that, which is so important to address gun trafficking. And a red flag law, so that if somebody is in crisis and is an imminent threat to themselves or others, then they can be separated from their firearms. Those are good starts, but there's a lot more that we can do, whether it is a ban on assault weapons. These are weapons of war. They should not be out on our streets. And then dangerous ghost guns. These are gun kits that people are able to buy without passing a background check, and they don't have serial numbers, so they're untraceable. So there's more we can do to strengthen those laws. But as important as those laws are, there are other things we can do as well, and they work. So if we approach violence, especially gun violence, as a health crisis, then we look at it differently. Studies have proven that someone who is exposed to violence, whether they're the victim of it or someone in their family experienced it or they witnessed it, is at a very high risk within the next 30 or 60 days of becoming a victim themselves of gun violence or even a perpetrator, unless you break that cycle. And with trained public health officials who have the trust of the community, when an incident of violence occurs, can go in, talk to those who have been impacted by it, and try to break that cycle, it is very successful. And I know that's because we've run a couple of them. We secured funding to do one in Richmond for about 9 months, and it proved effective. We were able to reduce homicides 30%, or 50%, and overall violent crime by 30%. Right.
Oh, wow.
So these programs work, and I was so pleased to see President Biden announced, along with the first steps toward addressing gun violence, that he would include billions of additional funding for those types of evidence-based strategies to get at the root of violence.
That's key when you mention treat this as a health crisis, because now we don't look at it as just being, oh, that's just those people, that's just those people. We look at it as being something that's impacting our mind state, our physical ability, our communities from a health perspective, and don't put a label on it. And again, I think that's the smart way to go. And I think we've seen a lot of support around that. Now, of course, you're going to have your detractors with everything, but those are smart ways to go.
But we are able to address those who are skeptical with data.
Absolutely.
And the data is proving that these types of approaches are successful. And, if they don't want to look at it as a moral imperative, they can look at it in dollars and cents. Yes, these strategies can involve costs and are expensive, but so is the cost of not doing anything.
Absolutely.
From, when acts of violence occur, obviously there's a tremendous impact on those who are the victims of it, but also within our society for, law enforcement, for the court system, for prisons and jails. And so if we're able to reduce the violence overall through these strategies, I think we can also show cost savings. It requires an upfront investment, but in the long term can be well worth it.
That's sad. That's Mark Herring, Attorney General for the Commonwealth of Virginia, who's running for re-election to represent you again as Attorney General here in the Commonwealth. Attorney General Herring, tell us where our listeners can find more information about you, where they can volunteer, where they can donate, and read about more about your priorities for building safer, stronger communities for all Virginians.
Well, I would invite listeners to go to our website, forag.com, and you can get a lot more information there. You can sign up for email updates. You can follow us on your favorite social media platform. And I am asking for your support and your vote on June 8th or earlier if you choose to vote early. And I look forward to seeing folks on the campaign trail. And thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Attorney General, and good luck to you in the primary.
Thank you. Take care.
Again, thank you so much for joining us for the conversation with Attorney General Mark Herring. After our commercial break, we'll come back with Delegate Jay Jones, who's also running to be your next Attorney General. We'll be back in just a moment.
Blazing Hot 91 is looking for your support. Financial support, that is. Get ready. Coming this May, we're going to see how much you love us.
Quiet, he's going to say something.
We'll be asking for your tax-deductible contribution. We're a public radio station. That means we're supported by you, the listener. You guys tell us you love us all the time.
The hottest radio station.
Now, you can show us how much. And that keeps us blazing the airways with your urban alternative mix of music.
Yo, you know the deal.
So start planning your contribution to Blazing Hot 91 now. Be ready to drop that cash. Save the date, May 17th, 18th, and 19th. It's all love, and it's all for you on Blazing Hot 91.
Make sure you wake up early Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. with the Blazing Hot Morning Show.
I'm Cheryl Wilkerson. I'll have your whole moment, your good news, your headline news, and don't forget, entertainment news.
I'm DJ INC from the Top Ropes. I'll tell you why every day's a holiday. I'll give you the update on those sports and on-the-spot traffic and weather updates.
And check out the Blazing Hot Tea Report with your girl K Noteworthy, where I'll be serving all the scoop about your favorite celebrities.
And can't forget about the Blazing Hot Morning Shower mix with the legendary DJ Heart Attack. So start your day with us Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. right here on Blazing Hot 91. We'll get through this together.
It's selection season, and here on Save the Water, we're continuing our discussion with candidates who want to run for statewide office to represent you as Lieutenant Governor, Attorney General, and Governor. Today, we're talking with candidates who want to represent you as Attorney General. In our first segment, we had a conversation with Attorney General Mark Herring and some of his achievements of his last two administrations and why he wants to run again and why you should reelect him. In this half hour, we're going to have a conversation with Delegate Jay Jones, who wants to run here to represent you as Attorney General. Also, we want to give a congratulations to all of our graduates of Norfolk State University and all over the Commonwealth. Here we recognize graduates from 2020 and 2021, and our very own DJ Scandalous, who's our producer here for State of Water, and to all the other staff members, Braxton and Ms. Harrison here at WNSB. Keep in mind, continue to adhere to safety precautions. I know we have beautiful weather, but we want to make sure that you're taking care of yourself because remember, we will get through this together. So let's get right to it. Right now, we want to welcome current delegate for the 89th District, Jay Jones, who wants to run for you to represent as Attorney General for the Commonwealth. Welcome, Delegate Jay Jones, to Stay the Water.
Hey, thank you for having me. It's great to be with you this afternoon.
Absolutely, absolutely. And again, you know, we want to again extend our thanks for you to coming on here. You know, the name Jones, of course, you know, Jay Jones and the last name Jones is known throughout Norfolk and, of course, through your family and so forth and through the legal field and accomplishments that your family has. Really made a lot of strides when there were some tough times, for African Americans to make strides in those areas. Can you talk a little bit about, growing up, and in that environment as your parents being in the legal community and then aspiring to be where you are as an attorney, as a delegate, and now running for Attorney General here in the Commonwealth?
Well, look, my parents are very important to me, but as we have gone throughout this campaign, I have often thought about my ancestors. I have the great fortune of being able to trace my lineage back to slaves in the American South, like so many of us who are listening to this show and
Absolutely.
who are moving through this world. And, I often think about, how they would feel and what they would think about their descendant who has the opportunity to be Virginia's first black attorney general. My grandfather, Hillary Jones, one of the lights of my life, he was a pioneering civil rights attorney in Norfolk. He was born and raised in Huntersville. He went to Booker T, the old Booker T, left to go to Virginia State, met my grandmother. They moved to Massachusetts because he couldn't get a law degree in Virginia because of Jim Crow and segregation. But he came back to Norfolk and got so involved in the movement. He was the first black man on the school board in Norfolk. He was the first black member of the State Board of Education. But he had my dad and my uncle integrate Ingleside Elementary School back in 1961. And I actually had the great fortune of going up to Ingleside a couple of weeks ago with my dad and my uncles, which is incredibly the same structure that they went to 60 years ago. And I was thinking about the things that they've seen, the struggles that they have been through, and how we've made a lot of progress, but we have a lot more work to do. And my family obviously is important to me and they inspire me, but my campaign for Attorney General is about this moment and this opportunity that we have in Virginia's history to bring about true and equal justice reform. The same things that my mother and my father and my grandparents were fighting for the generations before. So we have to confront this head on. And I think given my lived experience as a black man, my experience as an attorney, and my time in the legislature makes me well prepared and properly equipped to tackle this head on right now and be the leader that Virginia needs to create a system that works for everybody.
Absolutely. Being a lifelong resident of the city of Norfolk, and again, you talked about your family, your lineage, and how you've researched and how you kind of see yourself. Where did that drive for public service? I mean, you could have gone into private practice or a large firm and just kind of, really lived the life, right? As an equity partner and the like, but there was a drive to call to public service. Where did that come from?
Well, look, my father served in the House of Delegates for 15 years in the same seat that I now hold. My mother was incredibly involved in the community as a criminal defense attorney. My grandparents set an incredible example for me, and it has always been sort of imbued in my family that, to whom much is given, much is expected. And we have a really deep commitment to helping other people. I think if you know me or my family, that is our main priority. And I've been fortunate enough to represent Norfolk in the legislature for the last several years, but it has never lost on me that the things that I vote on and the issues that I champion in the legislature aren't just for the city of Norfolk. It's for the entire Commonwealth of Virginia. And so growing up around that stuff was certainly important and left an indelible mark on me. But I will tell you, politics is not necessarily about the particular person. It's about timing. Right. And I ran for this seat 4 years ago because it appeared to be the right time for someone who was young, who could represent a diverse community because Norfolk has a lot going on, right, and really take those issues to Richmond. And now running for Attorney General, I think, this is a moment in our trajectory, our long, history that's got, a lot of challenges in it, as it relates to racism and slavery and the sort of construct of race relations. But we need to tackle that head on. And, we can't think about where we're going, right, where we're going to be without understanding where we've been. But we have to look ahead about how we can forge that path together. And, when I see things like the terrible tragedy in Virginia Beach where Donovan Lynch was murdered, or the situation in Spotsylvania where Isaiah Brown, who is still in critical condition after being shot 10 times by a sheriff's deputy, and that comes on the heels of George Floyd and Jacob Blake and Ahmaud Arbery and all of the things that we've seen here in this country over the last year and a half. We have an opportunity to rise to meet this moment, and we need leaders who are going to step up and take on those tough challenges, even when they're not politically popular. And that's something that I pride myself on because I've lived this stuff. I know what it's like to walk through this world as a black man. It is not particularly easy.
Right.
But we need people who reflect the Virginia of where we're going, not where we've been, who understand the challenges of this moment viscerally and personally. And I think that is what is really special about this election and what we're talking about and what we're trying to do.
You talk about doing things that are not popular. And a lot of times, we look back on our heroes and, we build statues to them. We name holidays after them. We put them on our money and things of that nature. But many times what made them a hero made them they first created and made them a villain. Those things were not popular to stand on at that time. And when it relates to, the criminal justice system, you've been quoted and you've talked about, reforming our criminal justice system, and you've stood on eliminating qualified immunity. What is your reason for wanting to eliminate qualified immunity or scale it back? And how do you foresee that as being a step in the right direction of reforming our criminal justice system as it relates to interactions of police and also communities of color?
Well, look, I think what we've seen over the last several months, not just in Virginia, but across this country, has forced us to take a really hard look at who we are and our practices. And I have every amount of respect for the people who serve as police officers, who put their lives on the line. But we want to make sure that we've got accountability and transparency. And for those who are listening who are unfamiliar with qualified immunity and that doctrine, it is a judge-made doctrine that has its roots in protecting the Ku Klux Klan, who used to demonize and victimize people.
Still do.
Yeah, exactly. And so it protects those bad actors from liability, and it protects them from civil liability. To me, when there are instances of excessive force and unnecessary force that are used by law enforcement, those victims should have recourse in the court of law to have that case tried by a jury of their peers or a judge. Right now, qualified immunity blocks that process. But, I've worked diligently with my colleague, Delegate Jeff Bourne from Richmond, to make sure that we end that practice here in Virginia. And we had an opportunity to do so. We couldn't get it across the finish line. I've got gray hair on my head and I've lost years off my life because we have worked so hard to do this. And I still think that as Attorney General, we could use our pulpit and our platform to get this thing done. But that's part of our criminal justice reform plan. We put this out earlier this week, and it's got several components, and I'm so proud of what we've been able to put out because it tackles the issue of restoring judicial discretion, right? Getting rid of mandatory minimums, letting our judges evaluate people and their cases on a case-by-case basis, expanding the conviction integrity unit in the Attorney General's office that was recently created. After 7.5 years, we've seen this division created, but we want to make sure that we're giving people access to true and real justice. There's a situation in Windsor where these two young men have been in prison for 20 years for a murder that it seems like they might not have committed. Right. Even the people who put them in jail are now saying the evidence was certainly sort of unfounded, or there's new evidence that's come to light. But we also want to change our sentencing structure here in Virginia. We want to reform our juvenile justice system, and we need a civil rights division that's got investigatory and enforcement power to go into situations like Virginia Beach, like Windsor, like Spotsylvania, to make sure that we are getting to the bottom of what happened and that we're holding people accountable. Frankly, I'm disappointed when I hear folks say we need, an independent investigation by the state police. I think a lot of folks across Virginia are very skeptical of police investigating other police officers. And I think what we deserve more now than ever is an attorney general who's going to lead that fight. And, I will always lead the fight for equal justice. And I've laid that out in our plan. But this campaign has been so focused on justice reform because that is what I hear from people all across this Commonwealth as we've traveled physically in 2019 and then virtually and distantly in 2020 and 2021. We don't have a system that is fair. We have vestiges of Jim Crow, of the black codes, of mass incarceration woven throughout our criminal justice system. And we have to make sure that we're unwinding that and making it equitable so that no matter who you are, what you look like, where you come from, how much money you have in your pocket, you get a fair outcome when you have to go in front of our justice system.
Absolutely. You listen to WNSB Blazing Hot 91. This is Stay of the Water. I'm your host, Dr. Eric Claville. We're continuing our discussion with candidates that want to represent you through statewide office. Now we have the honor of talking with Delegate Jay Jones, who wants to run for Attorney General and represent you here in the Commonwealth as its top lawyer. Delegate Jones, you you talked about, well, first of all, you mentioned gray hair, and I just want to give this point of reference. I remember when I first heard you speak, you were invited to 200 Black Men event where they honor African-American young men who graduated honor roll and basically are going off to college. A beautiful event. As a matter of fact, my wife and our oldest son was honored this year in that event. It was virtual, but they're going to be honored this year. We haven't had it yet, but it's coming up. And I remember in hearing you for the first time, in a speech setting there in Virginia Beach at the convention center. And yes, there was no gray hair there. But fast forward 4 years, and there's plenty there, and that gray hair comes from a lot of hard work, it's a lot of stress, and so forth. And I want our listeners I want you to talk about some of the hard work you've done in the 89th and for the citizens of the Commonwealth in fighting for them.
Yeah, look, I think I had some gray hair a few years ago, too. I think it's just accelerated in the last year or so because of this campaign. It takes a lot to go around the state and have conversations, honest conversations with people. But I've been so humbled by not only the support that we've been able to build across this Commonwealth, but people's willingness to share their thoughts, even if we don't necessarily agree. And I also want to say congratulations to your son. The 200 Plus Ben is a fantastic organization. I myself was a scholar back in 2006, I think, and an organization that I have long been affiliated with, and they do great work, and I'm hopeful that we can obviously get back to doing that in person sometime soon. But
Absolutely.
Over my time in the legislature, I've really prioritized justice reform. That's certainly something that folks in Norfolk are very, very concerned about. I'm so thrilled to talk about the Ashanti Alert, which we passed in 2018, which created a missing persons alert for people between the ages of 18 and 60 in the wake of that tragedy in which Ashanti Billy was kidnapped from over there by the Navy base and unfortunately found dead several days later.
Yeah.
But the family, Tony and the rest of the Billy family, certainly really dug in as advocates to try to save future children from the fate that their daughter had. And so to work with them was tremendous. I was proud to lead the fight to abolish the death penalty here in Virginia. I think just a few years ago that would have been unthinkable, but I was a chief co-patron and I stood with Governor Northam, who has endorsed our campaign for Attorney General, at the Greenville Correctional Facility just several weeks ago in Jarrett, Virginia, which is the site of the last electric chair chamber in the state where they were carrying out executions. And that was powerful because, historically the death penalty has been applied indiscriminately, particularly to Black men and Black people in this Commonwealth. And it has its roots in lynching, and I firmly believe that it was nothing more than state-sponsored racism. And so my commitment to getting that off the books was very, very strong. And so I think, those are examples of ways that we've been able to lead in terms of justice reform. I've become a very vocal advocate for the consumer to hold our energy utilities accountable so that we get fair deals on our bills, whether it's for electricity or natural gas, but also trying to push for environmental protections here in the Commonwealth to make sure that Norfolk in particular, which has its issues with sea level rise and climate change, is protected so that it is a city that's going to be resilient and that, my children and their children and their children hopefully will be able to enjoy it and love it the way that I do. But, we've done so much over the last 4 years, but now we've got to orient ourselves for this new Virginia decade. And I think we have an historic opportunity to highlight some fresh faces, different voices, new perspectives. Those folks who have traditionally been left behind, left out, and forgotten. It's our moment to step up and take the reins and say, this is the Virginia that we want to create. And I'm so happy about the opportunity that I have in front of me, right, to bring that about. Governor Northam has endorsed our campaign. Congressman Bobby Scott has endorsed our campaign. Congresswoman Elaine Luria, Mary Sue Terry, who was the last Democrat to hold the Attorney General's office and the first woman elected statewide, They know that we have the energy, the conviction, the vision to get things done and to lead in this moment, whether it's politically popular or not. We don't wait to see which way the winds are blowing about how an issue is going to shake out. You take a stand, and you take a stand for the right things, and I look forward to doing that as Attorney General.
You're speaking of doing the right thing, and you mentioned equity. And one question I did ask Mark Herring about equity, it relates to African Americans and economic opportunity. From a lot of times candidates and politicians and interest groups come to the Black community, to stand, to march, to voice concern and be at the forefront and really take a lot of the initial hits. But when it comes time for economic opportunity, we're usually not invited to the table. We have to hear about it from somewhere else and probably coming behind the eight ball, the proverbial eight ball, and not really getting the full impact or opportunity that we should receive. As it relates to equitable economic opportunity, what do you think? What is your plan in order to ensure that African Americans are at the table before the deals start or before the policy starts, so that our voices and input can be heard?
Well, I think everybody is familiar with the saying that if you're not at the table, then you're the one being eaten.
Oh, you're on the menu.
I think for a long time that's been the case. And, I've been disappointed to see so many politicians come into our communities and talk about the things that they're going to do to try to help, Black folk, but only when it's election time. And then when push comes to shove, they'll say, well, I don't know if we can do that right now. I don't know if we're ready. But I think, as a member of the Black Caucus, we have been taken to higher heights by our chair, Delegate Lamont Bagby from Henrico, who is a graduate of Norfolk State University, Behold. And I think he gets what we're trying to do. And so we have been so committed to making that possible. That's why we fought for equity provisions in the legalization of marijuana process, to make sure that as we move towards the commercial market, that we get our piece of the pie. That as casino gaming comes online here in this Commonwealth, there are provisions for minority contractors and subcontractors to be involved in the construction and the process, and that there's minority ownership in stakes in those groups. I think those are two tremendous things. But we've also been committed, not just on the justice reform front, but making it easier to vote here in this Commonwealth, because again, we can't make our decisions and we can't help make choices if we are being barred from the ballot box. As the descendant of people who paid poll taxes and who had to take literacy tests and who had their right to vote denied or abridged altogether, I know all too well that we have to get up and step up and show out. And so I think that's a huge part of this as well, because we can't begin to make those gains without our voices being heard as a ballot box, because then you elect people who are going to support the policies that will provide for better economic opportunities for Black people here in this Commonwealth. But then you use that vote to hold people accountable as well. So those people who come into our communities and say that they're for this and they're for that, if you don't see those results over the course of a term, you can change that, right? You can change that person who's in that seat. And so I think that's a huge thing that we need to remember, is that, one, we have this primary election on June 8th, but two, we vote every June and every November in this Commonwealth,
right,
even year in an odd year. And so we can't take any elections off. Every time we say that this is the most important election of our generation, of our lifetime, and it's true, because we can't have people who are looking out for us in the room unless we're voting those right people in, because then if we're not there, we're the ones who get eaten for lunch. As a delegate, we've been committed to making sure that everybody has an opportunity to lift themselves up here in this Commonwealth.
Absolutely.
And as Attorney General, we will go out and meet people where they are and roll up our sleeves and have those conversations with community members and put them in those positions to succeed. It's more than just sitting in Richmond and filing lawsuits. You are a statewide office holder, and people expect you to lead. And as Attorney General, I will be in those places that have traditionally been lost, forgotten, left behind, as a voice for those people who feel as if government hasn't been working for them or the government doesn't care about them. I believe that government can be a force for good. And I hope to continue to push in that regard as Attorney General, because
Absolutely.
We have 8.5 million people here in this Commonwealth. This is a rapidly diversifying place. This is not the Commonwealth of 2017. It is not the Commonwealth of 2013. It certainly is not the Commonwealth of my parents' generation. And so we have a lot of work to do to commit ourselves and recommit ourselves to bringing about a Commonwealth that works for everybody, that is equitable and just, and gives everyone an opportunity to succeed. And I think we've started down that path, but now we can't rest on our laurels. We've got to build on these things as we look ahead to this new Virginia decade with leaders who understand the challenges of this moment and where we're going. And I think that, I know I'm that person, and I think we have a really great chance here in Virginia to highlight those voices to take us to the next level.
Absolutely. Now, let's go toward a speed round here. because we are coming to the end of our conversation, and it has been truly enlightening. Because, like I said, we see you, we hear you, but just hearing the in-depth analysis of these issues that you helped to champion just in a very short time, being part of the Virginia Legislative Black Caucus, and also in the things that you're doing now on the campaign trail. If you are fortunate enough to be elected Attorney General for the Commonwealth, what are the 3 top priorities that you will address day one?
Justice reform is the first and foremost, and I would encourage folks to go to our website, jjones.com, to check out our plan that we released last week. It is comprehensive and it is forward-looking, and it will help Virginia get to that truly equitable and just place that we need it to be. Worker protections, also very important. We want to make sure that we are fighting for those who are putting in an honest day's work and who are trying to make ends meet. And then voting protection. We have proposed the creation of a voter protection and election integrity unit because we don't want to see any fear, intimidation, harassment. At the ballot box here in this Commonwealth, we've got an insidious history with that, and we will use our resources to make sure that we are deploying them in a way that's going to meet the challenges of this moment right now.
And then also with the influence, and I think a lot of people don't realize the heavy influence that the Attorney General has, especially in hiring and influence on our system. What are your thoughts as it relates to being in office and the diversification of the Attorney General's office and the encouragement of diversification across other Commonwealth's attorneys' offices?
Well, I think as an Attorney General, you've got to lead, and you set an example as the head of that office, but also the chief attorney for the state. And I think the staff in the Attorney General's office, whether it's the attorneys, the investigators, the support staff, should reflect what Virginia looks like now. And we obviously will be committed to hiring diverse attorneys, black attorneys, brown attorneys. We obviously will hire very qualified and capable people. But I think what you see in that office now is something that leaves a lot to be desired in terms of diversity. We will commit to making sure that the staff and the people in that office look like the rest of Virginia, and will use our example to lead and take that on the road to show the other Commonwealth attorneys that, hey, you've got to step up and do this as well. Like I said, this is not the Virginia of 17 or 13. This place is rapidly diversifying, and we've got a lot of different voices here, and we want to make sure that we highlight those voices. And the Attorney General also has a lot of work that they do with outside firms,
right.
And
Absolutely.
We want to make sure that we are prioritizing firms that have diverse partners and have diverse associates and that are predominantly minority law firms to do that work. Because, and I'll tell you this, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result.
That's right.
And we cannot settle for the status quo. Because things have been done a certain way for so long does not mean that we can't change them. This campaign has been centered on reimagining this old office in a new way and redeploying our resources to meet the moment right now, the Virginia of 2021 and beyond. And as a leader in that office, we will set the tone, and that will be seen not just here in this Commonwealth, but across this country. Virginia has been leading in the South. We are, I think, in the vanguard of so many policies that folks just a couple years ago thought would be unthinkable, but have had a tremendous amount of success. And I want to continue to build on that. And I look forward to being someone who's going to take the tough stands, who's going to lead by example and live their values. That to me is really, really important.
That's Delegate Jay Jones, who's running to represent you in the Commonwealth as his next Attorney General. To find out more about his campaign, he mentioned it before, but I'll mention it again. Go to jjones.com. That's JAYJones.com, where you can contribute, volunteer, and also learn more about Jay Jones for Attorney General. In your last remarks, give us one final word.
Well, I want to thank you guys for having me, and thank you for having all the candidates on. It's really important to keep the voting population informed, and I hope that everybody will go vote in this June 8th primary, and I hope that you will cast your ballot for Jay Jones for Attorney General, because we have a chance to really lean into this moment and highlight some voices and faces and ideas that have traditionally been left out and left behind. But don't take my word for it. Governor Ralph Northam has endorsed our candidacy, along with Congressman Bobby Scott, Congresswoman Elaine Luria, former Attorney General Mary Sue Terry, and 35 members of the General Assembly. They believe in our energy, passion, conviction, and vision, and I hope that you do too, and I'm asking for your support.
Absolutely.
Thank you guys for listening.
Thank you so much. And we want to thank all of you for listening to Stay in the Water, where we bring movers, shakers, and policymakers to discuss issues that are important to you, the community. Again, we'd like to congratulate all of the graduates of Norfolk State University Behold the green and gold on this milestone accomplishment, and join us on next week as we interview candidates who are running for governor. And remember, we will get through this together.